When I was invited to talk at today's event, I felt both excited, because this is TEDx, and slightly terrified, because, well, this is TEDx. And when I sat down to work on my talk, I found myself in a state of absolute overwhelm. Now, I found this quite ironic, you see, given that the theme of today's event is fight or flight, because while overwhelm is not associated with either fighting or fleeing, it is associated with a third commonly known response, which is freezing, feeling paralyzed. And that's exactly what I felt. I was so overwhelmed by the numerous thoughts roaming around in my head and the pressure I had put on myself to do well that I did nothing. For weeks, I did nothing. But it wasn't all for nothing, because it did make me reflect upon this concept of overwhelm. And while it's a very human thing to feel, it's also quite an ambiguous term, so allow me to define it for you. According to the Cambridge Dictionary, the word overwhelm has multiple definitions, one of which is to be too much, or almost too much, for someone to manage. Now, you might recognize the feeling of overwhelm from your own life. Maybe you've experienced it when a big project came up at work, or if you're a student like me, when multiple deadlines coincide. Or maybe you've experienced it when you've gone online shopping, and all you needed was, say, a new bag, and suddenly you had a staggering 4,000 bags to choose from. Now, these 4,000 bags is an example of overwhelm caused by choice. Some of you may be familiar with the American psychologist Barry Schwartz, and in his best-selling book, Schwartz argues that higher degrees of freedom, that the choice that is given to those of us living in modern, Western, affluent societies does not make us happy, it makes us miserable. He argues that higher degrees of freedom do not lead to higher welfare, but rather to self-blame and regret and too much time wasted on decision-making that does not add any value to our lives. And this is exactly what I believe our young people today is experiencing too. You see, a month or so ago, I came across a video online that touched me deeply. It was a video, you can see it here, a screenshot from it, with a girl who sat on the ground, a young woman. She's sitting on the ground, there's this beautiful sky behind her, and on the text, she lists some of the lives that she would like to live. And she articulates how overwhelming she finds it and how insane she thinks it is that we have all these opportunities available to us, yet so little time to pursue them. And so naturally, I went to read the comments, and they were heartbreaking. There were only a couple hundred comments at the time, but the vast majority expressed a similar sense of overwhelm, of feeling confused and paralyzed. In one comment, a user wrote, "I find it absolutely paralyzing that I can do anything I want in my life, but not everything." In another comment, a quote from the book Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close by American novelist Jonathan Safran Foer appeared, and the quote goes, "Sometimes I can hear my bones straining under the weight of all the lives I'm not living." Some commenters even expressed a sense of grief for the lives that they won't get to live. Now, this post, and not least the comments, resonated deeply with me. You see, ever since I was a young girl, I too have been imagining different lives for myself. And it's all very incredibly exciting, because there are an infinite number of variations to this life I've been given that I can choose to explore. There are so many future me's to discover, career paths to consider, places to live. In one life, I live somewhere in a big city, and I'm focusing all my energy into climbing that corporate ladder, into making a name for myself. In another life, I live somewhere in the countryside, a life of sunrises and serenity. In a third life, I live somewhere in the suburbs with a partner, kids, and a golden retriever. It's a life of sports practices and barbecues in the back garden. There's a life where I become a digital nomad, a small business owner, an author. Now, you may have done the same thing for yourself. After all, our ability to imagine the future is one of the things that make us distinctively human. Yet, as exciting as thinking about the future can be, it can also be incredibly overwhelming. Now, the more I looked into this, the more I came to see that this is not talked about. The video, which now has more than 3 million views, clearly proved that I'm not the only one feeling overwhelmed, and so did the conversations I had with friends. Yet I was surprised to see that this issue, albeit quite niche, is barely acknowledged in academia. Now, the lack of research only emphasizes the importance of articulating this issue, because it is an issue. Recently, I've seen more and more videos of people my age online who feel so incredibly lost in this extraordinary world of opportunity, lost trying to figure out who they are and who they want to be, where they want to live in this world that is now more connected than ever, what career path to pursue when dreams are conflicting. We don't talk about it, but I believe we have a generation of bright and privileged young people who feel so overwhelmed by the vast number of opportunities available to them and the pressure to make the right choices that they freeze, that they feel so paralyzed they don't know what steps to take. Now, I understand if some people find it hard to empathize with this. After all, we are told over and over again that we are so fortunate and so privileged. And the people saying these things are absolutely right. The only reason we can even start considering pursuing these different lives for ourselves is because we are incredibly privileged. But I dare say we know that we are incredibly privileged. We know that. We know that our parents and grandparents did not have the opportunities that we have. We know that, but that does not necessarily make it easier. On the contrary, it can lead to feelings of shame, because if we have it so easy and yet struggle, then what does that say about us? Now, I believe most of us want to make our parents proud. We want to succeed. We know that we've been given the very best prerequisites to do so, that there's not much standing in the way of us pursuing our dreams, creating a good life for ourselves. And we also know whose fault it is if we fail to do so, who to blame. And one of the comments, which is this one I got to a little early, from the video explicitly asked, how do we forgive ourselves for all the things we did not become? Now, this matters. As much of a luxury problem as it might seem, it matters, and it can have serious consequences if we feel so overwhelmed. If we look at the individual, feeling paralyzed can lead to great misery. Imagine having dreams for yourself that you have the resources to chase, but you're feeling too overwhelmed to pursue. By being trapped in our heads, we're holding ourselves back from realizing ourselves and our potential, and that's not benefiting anyone. And from a biological perspective, prolonged experiences of overwhelm, which is a stress response, can impact all systems of the body. According to the American Psychological Association, some of the responses to stress that we can see in the body over the long term can be headaches, migraines, fatigue, muscle tension, immune disorders, and it can increase the risk of heart attacks and strokes. And these are just some of the risks of stress. Now, I fully acknowledge that it can be hard for the older generation to understand what it's like to be young today. Granted, the world does look significantly different today than it did 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. Yet, I think we can all agree that the freedom today is greater than ever. So is the knowledge and the insight available to us with a single click. Every day, we're welcomed into the lives of strangers through the screen. And every day, we are introduced to other ways of living, other places to live, other directions to go. So many lives have been added to the catalog, so to say. And this only adds to the overwhelm. But we cannot let the overwhelm paralyze us. We need to move past it. Now, the world is full of good advice on how to do that, how to live your life. If you can dream it, you can do it. Nothing is impossible. But I believe we need to change that narrative. So I propose that we embrace the vulnerability, embrace feeling insecure and feeling lost. Now, while I'm here today to speak up for my generation, this affects all of us. And even if you might be sitting there thinking this does not really apply to me, I want to beg you, if you have any young people in your life, please talk to them, whether that be sons or daughters, nieces or nephews, or someone else. Please listen with compassion, not lectures on privilege or judgment, even if you mean well, but listen with compassion when we tell you that we feel lost. Make us feel heard. And if you, like me, are young and overwhelmed and lost by the freedom that you have, then there are two things I would like us to collectively remember. The first one is that we can try on as many lives as we want. We're often led to believe that we only have one shot, but that's simply not true. Yes, there are things in life that are permanent, irreversible, but there are a great deal of things that aren't. And if you're stuck in a situation that does not make you feel good, and you have the power to change it, I urge you to do so. Changing directions does not make you a failure. And secondly, as much as we can go to other people for advice, and I do realize the irony of me standing here saying this, there's only one person who can live your life, and that's you. You deserve to feel happy, to feel alive. And as such, I beg you to please go out there and explore. Go see what life has to offer. Go live. Thank you.